I'm Ryan Pack.
And I'm Nicole Barlow.
And this is Soundtrack Your Life, where we talk to a guest about a soundtrack that they feel connected to. Today we have Scott and Katherine from This Is the Greatest Song I Have Ever Heard in My Entire Life. Welcome, Scott and Katherine.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're thrilled to be here. This is a dream come true.
If you listen to the podcast, Scott has been on a couple times. We had him on for music and lyrics, which we will draw a connection to today, and Elf for our holiday episode. Mm-hmm. And Katherine is the producer for This Is the Greatest Song I Have Ever Heard in My Entire Life. And she's also on a bonus episode.
Yeah, Scott and I like to talk about music a lot, so when I get to be on that podcast too, it's a great time. So
and we're on a little bit of a break between seasons, but when we come back fairly soon, Katherine will be on the mic a lot more often. Yeah. So
I get to talk. I'm so excited.
We're letting her talk.
I come off mute on the Zoom.
Well, today we are going to talk about the 2023 Greta Gerwig film Barbie. So why are we talking about Barbie today?
I don't know. It's the biggest thing ever.
Yeah, it's a huge cultural touchstone. It's immediately like, this is the film of the summer, maybe the defining film of the year. We'll see how the fall and winter goes, but it's enormous. And I think it was made more enormous by this like Barbie and Oppenheimer thing coming out on the same day. But honestly, Barbie trounced Oppenheimer already. So it's even more than the sum of its parts, I think.
Now, did either of you do the Barbenheimer experience?
I did not. I've seen both, but not on the same day.
Yeah, we had some friends that tried to do it too, and people, like, it seemed like more people than I expected were doing that. I was like, that sounds like not fun. I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet. I was prioritizing Barbie, so.
Yeah. It's a real commitment, a real test of endurance.
Yes.
I was also I failed the endurance test, so I've only seen Barbie, but wow, like, what a film. Now I feel like we're in the roaring 20s, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. We're in like peak cinema. As we record this, Barbie just surpassed $1 billion at the box office. A barbillion.
Yes.
And for those of you who have not seen Barbie, like all three of you, there will be some spoilers in this episode. We'll try to save them for the end. But I don't know why you would listen to this Barbie episode and expect to not hear anything about the movie.
I'm going to be honest, it'll be very hard for me because I have no restraint.
Also that.
It's also just like the soundtrack we're going to talk about is so integrated in the film in a way I was not expecting. And so it's hard to like divest them even a little bit. Is like we're getting a lot of the story through the soundtrack when I even in the way before I watched the movie and just listened to the soundtrack I wasn't really expecting. So that's like such a cool aspect of it is like the way that music was used in the film.
Yeah, and I know everyone's kind of everyone is hating on Pitchfork right now, which they should. After this whole like Jenny Lewis Best Coast triangular thing that's blown up on Twitter. But one of the things that Pitchfork said about this soundtrack is it lives a lot better in Barbie world than it does on its own. And I think you could probably pretty safely make that claim in the context of the movie. I adore it. Out of the context of the movie, you can kind of pick and choose, I think, the pop platter that you wanna make out of it. But I'm so curious to know, sort of how you and Scott responded to the soundtrack, and if you had favorites, if you were following like the drops, because the way that they marketed this was also so smart and so uncommon for film, where they kind of treated it like a pop album, and they had reveals for who's going to be like the last Barbie artist on the soundtrack. Oh, it's Sam Smith. It's Billie Eilish. Were you kind of following all of that hype as it was happening?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely something where we for whatever reason, I kind of knew it was going to be this like big pop event. And like sometimes movie soundtracks like that are kind of more like separate than the movie and talked about. Last summer, it was Minions that had that really interesting 70s soundtrack that Jack Antonoff executive produced and like performed on, got Phoebe Bridgers on it, got a ton of other people on it. That was similar. I actually never saw that movie, but like I was following the soundtrack, and so that felt similar this time, except I knew I was going to see Barbie. I knew I was going to love it because it just sounds like my kind of film, directed by Greta Gerwig, starring all these amazing people. The way they marketed it is amazing. And so, yeah, I think the soundtrack, I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. And so just, yeah, hearing those first couple of songs that came out, we talked about it on our Instagram page too, because both Scott and I, Scott, especially being a film buff, we were both like really excited for this movie and talked about it a lot. And so just knowing that, you know, these drops were coming up made that all the more special, I think, for this.
Yeah. And to go back to what you were saying about like, I don't want to talk about Pitchfork at all, but just like that idea of like, but just like, you know, the soundtrack maybe making more sense directly related to the film rather than like on its own. Obviously you guys like have a podcast about movie soundtracks and think about them a lot more than we do, but like isn't that kind of usually the case, right? Like with a lot of films that like the soundtrack sort of plays better when you're familiar with the film and you remember like where the scene, you know, the scene where this song happened and all this kind of stuff, right? Like they're kind of inherently a little bit of a grab bag, right?
I think that's such a good question. And I think it really depends. You know, sometimes it depends for me on the curation and the quality of the movie. There are movies that I won't really watch again, like Death Proof is one that comes to mind where I'm like, I don't think you want to watch that movie a bunch of times. It's maybe not my top tier Tarantino, but I love the soundtrack. Yeah. So I think it really depends. And I think there's always the question of, does this stand on its own as a compilation, or is it an artifact that only belongs in the universe of this movie, or in this case, Barbie world? And I think if you're marking it on success of like, do you feel like you're in Barbie's dream house with this soundtrack? Like, again, absolutely. It's a Pepto-Bismol pop dream.
But also, I will never see Judgment Night, but I will still listen to that soundtrack.
Yeah, The Crow, not my favorite banger soundtrack though. Yeah. So I think it just depends. But with this one, it's like, it's kind of the perfect meeting of all things. You mentioned Greta Gerwig. We can't talk in this podcast without mentioning her. I want to say to the people that can't see this the way that I can, Scott's wearing the most amazing written by the screen and directed by Greta Gerwig, like
written for the screen.
Yeah, this is technically, you know, for Little Women. It's in the Little Women font, but you know, it applies as well. So
absolutely amazing. We're gonna make Scott tell us where to cop this shirt. It's really good.
Oh yeah, it's Super Yaki. They're the best. They make amazing stuff. So yeah. But yeah, I think for me, like thinking of the album as an album, it feels very kind of like uneven. Like I'm not going to listen to this album a lot, just to be totally honest. But I think that's kind of similar to like the way a lot of pop albums are nowadays, where it's like it feels a little bit like a playlist, and there are certain songs where you're like, this is a banger, like I'm gonna add this to our summer playlist, or like the going to the beach playlist, or whatever it is. And then there's a couple songs that like, yeah, I probably never really need to listen to this one again, but like those songs might be different for different people, so it really like has a bit of a range. And there are certain songs that like I absolutely love on this soundtrack. So
before we dive into the songs that we love, is Sam Smith worth being like the secret artist that they reveal at the end of this campaign?
No.
They kind of messed that up. I think like we knew this was going to be such a female or non-male heavy soundtrack. And obviously Sam Smith is non-binary, uses they, the pronouns, so it's not like, but the song is, you know, is it Man I Am or something like that? And like, it felt very anticlimactic. Honestly, kind of paralleled some of the film too, in terms of like, oh, this big reveal, and it's about you know, this like non-women like sort of thing, but whatever. But yeah, it was kind of a botched thing. And then there was the whole Billie Eilish, like responding to Mark Ronson's whatever, like story about it being the next big artist. And at least in my corner of the internet, which is very Taylor Swift heavy, everyone was like, oh, it's going to be Taylor Swift. Everyone was like so sure of that. And it like kind of made sense with some of like the things she's talked about before. But then, yeah, just being kind of like falling flat a bit with who they revealed. So I think they kind of, so much of this marketing is amazing, but that one was a little bit probably botched.
Yeah.
It was a flop for me.
Like Billy totally made sense.
Yeah.
And then I was like, Sam Smith last?
Yeah.
I guess.
Man, I am. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's more that. I think it's more like you expect like a pop princess at the top of that podium. That is your star moment.
Or at least Boy Genius.
Yeah, or subversive and weird. The movie is subversive and weird. Or at the very least, like everybody thought it was going to be Taylor. Maybe you get like a track from Britney. I don't know. Like it built it up so much because this hype machine got so huge that there was no way for Sam Smith to not be like, oh, wah, wah.
And Dua Lipa being the first one, it's like you feel like you want it to be bookended by pop goddesses. Like, you know, in my mind, Dua Lipa is kind of like the current day like pop goddess that we would want on this soundtrack. And so, you know, you would think that it's like kind of those bookends would be important for them. But, you know, it is what it is. It was like kind of a little bit funny, you know, the internet always like piles on after that. So it like ended up okay. But yeah, I don't think that was the best kind of rollout there.
Yeah, Dua Lipa's Dance the Night Away, which is very much integrated into the movie in a whole host of ways, is so catchy. It makes me mad. I don't even know if I like it, but it's so catchy.
Yeah.
It's in there forever. It is the true definition of like an earworm. So that's some damn fine pop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe that was one of the first songs that Mark Ronson had to kind of submit to Greta Gerwig. And I know I think he was like, oh, I was like up all night, like freaking out. And I was like, you're Mark Ronson.
Right? You have literally Dua Lipa singing. Like it's not gonna be bad.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like the way I love hearing stories about how this works behind the scenes, but I guess she was sending him like disco and she was referencing Xanadu and kind of like trying to get him in this sort of like Europop disco vibe. And I think they pretty much nailed it. I think they nailed it. And it certainly complements the dance sequence that it accompanies that everybody's seen if you've seen the trailer. So not a spoiler, Ryan.
Yeah. I saw this clip of Greta Gerwig talking about Dance the Night Away and about how, like, to her, disco sort of embodies the kind of Barbie world that she was creating, because it's, you know, fun and chic and dancey, but also kind of corny and a little self-aware and not self-conscious. And I think that makes so much sense. I kind of wished the rest of the or not the rest of, but more of the soundtrack kind of fit that. Like the opening song Pink by Lizzo sort of also fits into that world, but then outside of that we don't really go back to that vibe in the soundtrack, and it would have been cool to get a little bit more of that kind of flavor.
Yeah, I would have liked that too. That's a really great thing to mention, actually. Now it's making me consider whether I would miss this or more disco. But I almost kind of saw the songs as, even though they kind of feel like they're in the same world and they all have this kind of like happy, shiny pop thing going on, they're also kind of like changing outfits in a way. So it's like, you know, your Barbie changes into her like disco ball one-piece jumpsuit, and this is the song you get. So everything is kind of a nice... it's a nice ebb and flow that way. You do get, as you said, Scott, like just a whole platter of pop that you get to pick and choose from.
Well, I was surprised when they were doing the drops or the announcements or whatever, too, of the artists, and then listening to it, the variety that I did see in the soundtrack of artists. Like, obviously, I mean, going back to, Nicole, your point earlier about, you know, wanting or expecting there to be a lot of pop goddesses on there. Of course, like, we're not going to be able to fill an entire movie soundtrack filled with A-list celebrities, and so we do have to have kind of that variety of even fame levels, recognition levels. But the people that they did get and how they kind of integrated it, like the Kid Laroi and Khalid and Dominic Fike and Carol G, and then we have this kind of like K-pop on 50/50 is really interesting. I thought it brought in some of the like the diversity of what we saw in some of the actors as well, and some of the nuance where it's like, yes, you have your quote unquote stereotypical Barbie who's Margot Robbie, who's dancing to the Dua Lipa song, but you also have a lot of other different types of people within Barbie land and within the real world. And I think the soundtrack started to reflect that pretty well, even though, like we're saying, it's all pop music essentially, but it's kind of a different types of pop music that it keeps you guessing or interested a little bit in all that kind of music.
It's an expansive definition of pop, and none of it is too nostalgic. Also, it feels pretty new or reinvented or, I don't know, put together in a different way. Greta Gerwig was really resistant to the idea of putting in Aqua's Barbie girl, wasn't originally going to appear. And I guess Margot Robbie begged for it to be in the movie, like however that conversation went down. I guess you don't say no to like your lead actress, your Barbie.
And producer, she sort of produced she's the one who got it made, Margot Robbie.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't really say no to like the driving engine of your entire like Barbie movie.
And also everyone would have asked why it wasn't in the movie if they had left it off.
How do we feel about this kind of like remixed, chopped up Ice Spice and Nicki Minaj track? Seems divisive. I'm wondering how people feel about it.
Well, first, just to like give a little bit of a background, obviously, like we were all there at the time. I don't know how much you remember about this happening at the time, or if people listening do, but like when Aqua released Barbie Girl, there was like a huge lawsuit between them and Mattel over it. And so like they have a very fraught history with that song, this company, and so to me, like it made sense. But when the movie was announced and like it was starting to come out, like I feel like there was an early news article where it was like, no, the song is not going to be in the movie, and I was like, yeah that makes sense, because why? Like it was this really contentious thing, this like huge court battle about this song, that eventually Aqua won. But I think this is like the best of both worlds of having like, okay, it is in this movie now, but it's like only sort of in this remixed version that's over the credits with this other, Nicki Minaj and Ice Spice song. And I do want to hear what Katherine thinks about the song, but just in general, I want to make sure we circle back to the fact that like a lot of these songs on the soundtrack include samples and interpolation of other songs, and like that's a whole other thing we should talk about.
Right.
Yeah, I like this song. It's not something I'm listening to on its own. I'm more listening to in context of the soundtrack, and certainly a lot of these songs have kind of blown up on TikTok, and so when there's a TikTok about Barbie, it often has that as the audio, and so I hear that a lot there. And I think it, from my kind of read on how other people feel about this song, it's like the perfect ending song for the movie. And I think it was like a, without spoiling, it was, a little bit emotional at the end. And then all of a sudden it kind of bursts into this song that's very catchy and familiar with the sample in it and that sort of thing. And so I thought it was a nice way to end the film, and certainly is a good like amalgamation of kind of everything in the film, and then bringing back that nostalgia piece I think was really important as well.
Okay, question for the Barbs, Team Barbs. Can we start spoiling things now? Ryan, do I have permission to Dad? Okay.
Let's talk about Nicki for a second. So when this movie was announced, before I even heard that Greta was coming on board to direct and write it with Noah, I would have been like, so like Nicki Minaj is going to rap over Barbie Girl, right? Like that would have been my prediction whenever this movie was announced.
Yeah,
because she refers to herself as Barbie in her song.
Right.
She calls her her fans the Barbs. So it kind of totally made sense. I'm glad that as obvious as it is, like they kept it short. It's like 2 minutes long, so you don't get tired of it. Like they get in and they get out. You know, she makes her Ken reference. She makes a weird Bob Dylan reference. So I enjoy it because it's like before you can get sick of it, they're done.
Yeah.
High praise.
Yeah, very backhanded compliment. I'm sorry, but I also have I have history with Nikki.
Beef with Nikki beef. Let's tell the internet you're Nikki beef.
It's not beef. It's not beef. It's funny.
It's side-eyed.
So I shared this on a different episode. So Red Bull was doing this series of concerts in LA, and the last day was a secret show, and I was like, well, I'm just going to buy tickets for the secret show because that seems like they're going to have some sort of name. When we got there, they said, if you want your gift bag at the end, you have to stay for the whole show. I was like, yeah, like, okay. And so they had like an opener. It was this rapper, Jazz Cartier. He was really fun. And then everyone's like trying to figure out like, oh, who's going to be the headliner? Is going to be something hip hop related because that's what the opener was. And then there was like some guy walking around the venue who had like this black guy with a shaved head and a goatee. And then some guy in front of me, total pitchfork guy, was like, oh man, they got death grips. And I was like, they did not get death grips for this Red Bull show.
Death grips guy that had to stay for his swag bag. Anyway, go on.
That's so funny.
The guy ended up being in Nicki's band. But
Right.
Oh, what?
But you know, so at one point, like, there's this bedazzled microphone that goes from one side of the stage to the other, and all the like pitchfork guys are like, oh no, and so we got a free Nicki Minaj concert in a venue for like 500 people.
Nice.
That's amazing.
So it was cool, and so we're like, you know, 3 rows deep, me and my wife, and you know, throughout the show, Nicki's like trying to hype up the crowd, you know. Where my you know, Latino fans at, you know. I don't know if she asked where her white fans are. I assume not.
Everywhere.
But at one point she goes, where my Asian fans at? And she like looked me like dead in the eyes, and I was just like, I'm just here for the gift bag.
Oh my god.
Man.
Was the gift bag good at least?
Oh yeah, the gift bag was awesome. We still use the backpacks.
Wow.
We still we got a copy of High Fidelity on vinyl.
That's cool.
Also a really good story. So honestly, like, worth it.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, she did all, you know, it was like an hour-long set. She played nothing but the hits. I think she did her verse from Monster.
Her biggest hit,
That's great.
arguably.
Like, short enough that, where you didn't get sick of it? Is that how you felt?
Yeah, it was like the Barbie girl rap, you know? It was like, all right, in and out. Like, she was looking at the clock, too, you know?
I read an interview with Mark Ronson before this, and he was saying that, like, he, like, was just wanting Nicki Minaj. Like, he didn't really make a big sort of, like, deal about it. He's like, I don't know her personally. I don't have any connections. I just like really wanted her to be on this. And like you're Mark Ronson. Like, you probably have some connection, but however it happened, I'm glad that she ended up on soundtrack.
I'm Mark Ronson. I'm not sure if Nicki Minaj has heard of me.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not.
Before we continue with our episode, here's a word from our sponsor.
Enjoy listening to podcasts and ever wonder, can I make a podcast? But it seems so complicated, and good audio production can take time. What if there was a way to create an amazing podcast easily? Well, now there is. Introducing Podcasting Made Easy from Podtastic Audio. My production team will handle your entire audio production, allowing you to be the star of your show. This is Podcasting Made Easy. How easy? Well, so easy, you don't even have to press record. Now that's easy. Your listeners are waiting. Let's deliver. Sign up for a free strategy call today at podtasticaudio.com/easy.
All right, so there are some songs on this soundtrack that are sung by Ryan Gosling.
Spoilers.
Oh wow, is it time?
And now we have entered the spoiler
Let's
part.
go.
And we can talk about more songs, obviously. We don't have to just focus on these songs, but we are entering spoiler territory. If you're living under a rock, you may not have heard of I Just Can, but it has entered the Billboard charts at like 187 or something like that.
That's great.
That one also, I was talking about the TikTok memes before. That one has blown up on TikTok because there's this meme now, and I'm sure it's on other places as well. I just see a lot of TikToks that like people are saying, oh, this is my husband, his job is email, and like using that as the audio. So like, or this is my boyfriend, his job is desk, because he's just sitting at his desk all day and stuff like that. So referencing the line from the movie. So I think that too is like blown it up. From what I'm hearing is like just it's all over the internet right now, in addition to charting and being part of the soundtrack that people like.
I think it's impossible to talk about this movie and not mention how utterly fucking charming Ryan Gosling is in this, and how I was not sure he was. I'm kind of like Ryan Gosling neutral. I don't know if that's a terrible thing to say. People get mad at me for saying it. I think he's great, but like, I don't know. I didn't know he was capable of so much, because I really don't think anybody could have pulled off what he pulls off in this movie, because it's absolutely batshit and so fun and entertaining and perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, he has the best line readings of the entire film, just like again and again. Yeah.
The part where he says, I kind of lost interest in the patriarchy when I found out it wasn't about horses. I'm not doing that, Jeff, but that is the whole performance just absolutely slaps. The fact that he can do this entire, I don't know, whatever, Disney Channel inspired kind of dance montage, and then this entire musical number as Ken, incredible. Just so fun.
And the amount of times he says Mojo Dojo Casa House without breaking.
Yeah.
Oh man. And we would be remiss not to talk about the best moment in the film, where he goes back into his Mojo Dojo Casa House and goes, "Sublime!" when she
Sublime,
which is perfect. And apparently he improvised that line and like did a bunch of other takes, and the Sublime one made it into the film. So just perfect.
It's the best word choice. So this song, though, I'm Just Ken, which is like a sort of centerpiece of the third act of the film, was written by Mark Ronson and Andrew Wyatt. And so my previous episode on your podcast, the music and lyrics episode, those songs, many of them were also written by Andrew Wyatt.
Yep, Pop Goes My Heart.
Moment. Ryan told me that. It made me so glad. I was just.
And of course, the two of them also wrote Shallow from A Star Is Born. So
Oscar-winning songwriters wrote I'm Just Ken. Yeah, I read an interview with Ronson, and he said that, they're coming up with the song, and the line of I'm Just Ken, anywhere else I'd be a 10 is like the first lyric that like really like sank into his brain.
It's beautiful.
Naturally, it's poetry.
And he's like, I need, the song needs to talk about blonde fragility.
Blonde fragility.
Yeah. But yeah, it's this great sort of like 80s power ballad, and then it goes into, like you referenced, Nicole, like this sort of dance sequence in the Dream Ballet set of Singing in the Rain for some reason.
Yes, I got that too.
And it's one of those moments, frankly, there's a lot of these moments in the film where I'm like, why is this happening? What are we doing here? But like, it's so good that who cares? I don't know. I
was giggling my face off because I didn't understand it, and I felt like kind of halfway drunk, but not from the bad AMC cocktail I got that was called the Dolly and may or may not have had vodka in it. Right. It was just like just delightful. It was a dizzying, crazy, stupid delight. It's so stupid, and so many things have like, I think they hold back on just being fully stupid and embracing that, and Ryan Gosling really goes there, and it is the performance of the year. It is a tour de force.
Mark Ronson says that Ryan Gosling cut those vocals in like 3 hours.
Damn, Ryan!
That's great.
It couldn't have happened without him. He was the absolute centerpiece.
Yeah, him and Simu Liu have just like such a great chemistry.
Yeah. Like the perfect amount of dickishness towards each other.
Great rivalry. We talk a lot about, or I think a lot about, there is singing and there is selling it. And I think what what kind of like transcends, like, you may not be like a classically trained, like, wonderful singer, and Ryan Gosling, I'm sure, would admit that he's not, but he sells the shit out of that. Yeah. And I think that's really what matters, is the commitment to the bit. And he's incredibly committed, both in this and even in the, and again, like, we're in the spoiler sequence now, but the sequence where he's serenading Barbie on the beach, singing Matchbox 20's Push.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like, the Pete, like, Mojo Dojo Casa House has happened. We're in with the patriarchy now, bitch, because Matchbox 20's Push is happening.
And my favorite line of the film, let me play guitar at you.
And anybody who's ever been like personally serenaded with like prolonged, sustained eye contact knows how that feels.
Yeah. As someone who like knows how to play the guitar, I've always been so conscious about not doing that.
Because you're a good man, Scott.
I really try. Like, I am not going to play my guitar at you.
At you.
Yeah, I usually want them to ask me to play guitar at them.
Well, and I am so glad that I feel like the joke on the internet is like, okay, if a guy's going to pick up a guitar and serenade, it's going to be like Wonderwall. It's the Oasis Wonderwall. And I'm glad they didn't do that. I don't know if it's like they didn't clear it or what, but like, I'm glad that was not the most like obvious iteration of the joke. It was instead this, I don't know. I definitely know the song, but it wasn't like top of mind to be like, this is what we're going to play when we play guitar at women. Absolutely. So I thought it was just like, that was the subversive of it, like this nature of it was like perfect.
Something happened to my brain chemistry when I realized it was Push, and I'm like, wait a minute, oh no, I'm going to like the weird bad place in my like late 90s, early 2000s girl brain. Fantastic poll.
It's so good.
And he tries to match all of Rob Thomas's like vocal inflections as well.
It's so good.
Does so flawlessly. Yep.
So here is an interview with Rob Thomas from 1997 talking about how Push is not a song about glorifying domestic violence.
Sure, Rock. Let's hear it.
And he says, when Push first came out, I got a lot of mean, like angry women saying, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you about that song. And he says, it's not about beating women, that's for sure. In fact, in the song, I turned around the point of view on it. It was actually about a relationship that I was in and how I was being manipulated. It was all about emotional manipulation and emotional violence. I believe him that it's not about beating women, but I also don't understand his explanation.
So is he trying to say that he's writing from the point of view of the woman in the relationship? His partner in the relationship?
Yes.
Is that what he's trying to say?
That's like a good story. I don't really believe it, but like he can say that. That's fine.
But so in his defense, because I'm pulling up the lyrics now, just so we could be judicious about this, and particularly it looks I think in the second verse, because it starts, the first lyric is said, I don't know if I've ever been good enough, right? So it sort of leaves them, it's like an incomplete sentence that should be something says, or he says, or I said, or she said, or whatever. In the second verse, he does make it clear. She said, I don't know why you would ever lie to me. I'm a little untrusting. So it does in the text make it clear that the point of view, it's like him telling the listener what she said to him. But again, it's like, I don't know.
I think it just sounded really good together. Like, I want to push you way around, but like, obviously he's not thinking of like physically hurting someone. It just sounded good.
I think if we're putting this song on trial, I think the court votes some kind of lyric malpractice, right? Like, I think it's just like straight up ignorance at play. Like, did you not know it was going to come across like that? Of course it's going to come across like that.
Yeah.
Rob.
That's something we would hope would not come out today, but honestly, I don't know at this point.
but this is why this song is perfect for this scene. And I'm going to take us back to 1997 in San Diego, California, where I, like Ken, would go nowhere without my rollerblades.
Go on.
So, I would like rollerblade around the neighborhood because I couldn't drive yet and I was not cool. And there was like this 9-year-old kid who lived. I don't even know if I ever asked him what his name was. And he'd always want to talk to me. He'd be like, "Hey, like, you want to like play?" And I'd be like, "You are a child." But eventually, like, he'd be like, "Oh, I'm playing the Zelda game. Can you like? It's really hard. Can you help me?" And I would, spend half an hour beating a level and I'd take off. But at one point, because my whole life is based around music. My identity is music. I go, what kind of music you listen to, kid? And he didn't tell me the name. He just started singing the lyrics of Push.
Wow.
And like really aggressively at me.
Oh my God.
And, I was not super familiar with the song. Like I had heard it on the radio, but hadn't really like digested the lyrics or anything. And I was like, what is this? This song is super violent. Like, why are you
You're
singing
9.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you're 9. And so when he starts singing it in the movie, it took me back to that time. Ryan Gosling's Ken would totally misinterpret the lyrics of this song
Yeah.
as, some sort of like rallying war cry.
Right. Well, also, like, again, it's the Rob Thomas claim. Like, I don't know why this would be inappropriate as a song to serenade someone that I love so very much on the beach. It's just like a total swing and a miss. But he doesn't know that. He thinks he's doing great. His job is beach.
God, I wish my job was beach.
Yeah.
Can't even beach here.
Can I flip us over to another song I love on the soundtrack that isn't quite as hilarious as this, but my favorite song on the soundtrack was Angel by Pink Panthers. And even before it came out, it's just, it's such a Pink Panther song. I really like her music. It's 2 minutes long, like we were talking about with the Nicki Minaj song, which all of her songs are. But it's a very, like, apparently it's very nostalgic to some of the, like, Flash Barbie, like, dress-up games that used to be around in, like, the early 2000s. And then some of, like, the Barbie movies that came out after my time, the, like, animated ones in the 2010s. Apparently it kind of flows into those soundtracks really nicely, which I thought was interesting. It was kind of a flashback to some of the other like Barbie properties, but I just love the song. I think it's like she's able to have such a soft tone and a soft song, soft voice and that sort of thing while making it really exciting and, still driving forward. And it is a little weird. Granted, it's like there's a fiddle in there for kind of some reason. And there's like some ad libs that are like, like it's a little bit like what's going on, but it's a beautiful song and I've listened to it and it's like right now on my Spotify on repeat playlist, like really high up because it's a great song and it's like, it's beautiful. So to me, that one like stands out as like the one that I will probably take forward from that soundtrack into, future playlists and like things that I'll take forward with me, and that would not be what I would expect from that, but that was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
you can really kind of feel like the energetic excitement and heart that are in a lot of these tracks that, like, ironically could be super plastic, very phoned in. But I think, like, to your point, she went deep with her Barbie knowledge and kind of drew that out to make her track happen. And I think that's evident in so much of this movie is that everybody really loved what they were doing and did the most with it, I think, in most respects. And the soundtracks feels like that too. There aren't a lot of moments that are like completely phoned in. Maybe the Tame Impala song is a little phoned in.
Yeah, but I think it works in the
sequence. It works
in the sequence in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, it could have been a multiple Tame Impala tracks. I think that Tame Impala track plays over this really great, there's so much great like set design and so many great like practical sets in this movie, like amazing if you love that stuff. But they're going from Barbie land to the real world. And so their kind of like dreamlike transition is this Tame Impala track as they travel on various means of conveyance, like fake jet skis and things like that. And it's pretty wonderful in context.
Yeah. Is it time to talk about Billie Eilish?
I don't see why not.
I love this song. What Was I Made For? It's also, so of course it's like the emotional climax in the third act of the film. We finally hear the song, but I noticed, especially on my second time seeing the movie, that the melody gets used in the score like a ton throughout the movie, as like underscoring all of like these emotional beats of the Margot Robbie Barbie, like, learning more about the real world and about herself and all this kind of stuff, so that when it finally like goes into the full song, it's like this very satisfying moment. And I guess, I mean, it's not a super bold prediction, but like this is gonna be Billy and Phineas's next Oscar, right? Like they already have one and they're gonna get one for this.
I'm hoping that they don't submit this song and they just submit I'm Just Ken.
So you guys probably know this better than I do. I was thinking about this earlier. Are they can submit more than one song, right?
Yes, but
okay.
Then you risk splitting the vote.
Sure.
It's kind of the Encanto thing, right? We've talked about this with Encanto. Like, why didn't they submit multiple songs, or why not? We don't talk about Bruno, and so I think those are the decisions that need to get made about what you're gonna hype for that Oscar. But Billie Eilish is the safest bet to win it, obviously. And the moment that you're talking about at the end of the film, that packs a huge emotional wallop, by the way, that I was not anticipating at all. Where they show that she takes the hands of the creator of Barbie, and Barbie gets shown sort of what it's like to have the entire female human experience. And the thing that is really emotional about it, as Billy's song plays over it, all of those clips are people on the production team. They're people that worked on the film, and Greta asked them to give her home movies. And so it feels really, really real. And very, very emotional. And the song is a great buttress for all of that. So I think that, again, the way that it hits in the film for me it's very powerful. It's a good one.
Yeah, her vocals on that are just, I mean, it's a classic Billie Eilish song, not to diminish it in any way. But by that, I mean, too, that her vocals are so on point. There's like an instance where, she's just building and building very slowly, like she does in her songs. But the payoff of her vocals is just incredible. And she did some festivals last weekend. This past weekend, she performed at Lollapalooza and Oshiga. I don't know how to pronounce that.
In Montreal,
and performed this both times, the first live performance, and people went crazy for that too, because it's just such a special moment in the film, and like she performs it so beautifully live and on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I think so. I just saw, like, literally 2 minutes before logging on to this call, I saw on TikTok this guy, Jeremy Jordan, who's like a Broadway guy who I'm in love with. But he just did a concert last week, and he did it too, this song. So like, I think this one has legs. I think this is going to become like a real standard. And it's almost like a parody of a Billie Eilish song. Like, I think like if she didn't release it and you told me like, oh, like I made a parody version of what a Billie Eilish song about a Barbie would sound like and play this song, like I'd be like, oh yeah, that's really funny. It's a little too on the nose, but
well, it's funny because the interview I was reading with Mark Ronson was like, oh, we were doing all of this soundtrack work like last year. And so all of these artists, specifically he's talking about Ice Spice at the time, where it was like, she was like not as popular as she is now, but she's been, obviously like hugely gaining popularity in the past like 6 months, year, that sort of thing. And so it's interesting, like a lot of these artists, Billie Eilish, Dua Lipa, I feel like their songs are kind of indicative of like previous eras that they've had or previous albums they've had. Like Dua Lipa had Future Nostalgia, and her Dance the Night is very close to, Future Nostalgia. Billie Eilish had What Was I Made For? And like some of her music strays outside of this sort of like parody of herself sort of thing now. But I wonder if like when they were developing the soundtrack, writing the music, they were still sort of in their sort of previous album eras. And so, thinking that this is kind of like the closure of it. But when it comes out, obviously it's brand new and they have to kind of engage and interact with it. Like hearing, today that Dua Lipa is working on her next album. It's going to come out next year, and it's going to be totally different from her disco future nostalgia. It's kind of like, okay, well, she has this huge hit on her hands that is still in this, that is brand new to everyone hearing it for the first time this summer.
And she's working on it with Mark Ronson.
Which
is
that's
going to be, I think,
I'm excited.
Really interesting and really fun, given that this collaboration, I think, is really fun. So there's honestly all these kind of insane little, like you said earlier, Scott, samples and, interpretations pulled from other songs that and that you start to notice the more you listen to the soundtrack. And I imagine, like, the more you watch the movie, that give you that sense of I've been here before, which is kind of cool. I think pop music does that really well, not just in terms of how they reinterpreted Barbie Girl, but Speed Drive by Charlie XCX has these little loops that are like Cobra Style by Robin. Mickey is in there. These little things that kind of like these little elements of spice that like trigger that dopamine hit in your brain. You're like, oh, dopamine, cool. The whole movie is kind of like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Choose Your Fighter by Ava Max was like reminiscent of some of her earlier work too, and like almost kind of sample Kings and the Queens that is one of her songs, and so it's interesting, and apparently like none of that like came from up on high, or Greta didn't say like, oh, we need these interpolations, we need these samples. It was kind of like from the artists themselves. It's like, well, we want to bring in this sort of like familiarity and nostalgia to some of these songs too, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I could probably go on for a really long time about like Weird Barbie, like just the entire character and purpose of like Weird Barbie in this film. And the moment that Barbie, stereotypical Barbie, Margot Robbie, chooses the Birkenstock to enter the real world in her song to kind of go into the real world via Barbie convertible is it's Indigo Girls Closer to Fine, which everybody knows, but it's like it's such a good pick, right? It's such a good pick for so many reasons, because the sing along that you yell in the car already 10/10.
That was my push from this movie. Like push like that, but like this Closer to Fine was like my version of that in this film. It's like perfect.
Yeah.
It's like,
but it's
it's
also
earthy,
lyrically
it's real.
we're
real now, like perfect. It's so perfect.
Yeah. So good. And also like just to like make sure we talk about everything, I guess there's the Karol G song, like the sort of reggaeton song when they get to LA. That's cool to be in here. And then there's a couple songs that aren't like actually featured in the movie that are on here. There's the Haim song,
which is not good.
Which is fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's a parody of a Haim song, as we're talking about parodying of themselves.
It's no gasoline.
It's no gasoline.
So
That's
true.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then what do you guys think of like Pink, the Lizzo song, as like the opening? I feel like it's weird on the soundtrack because it's so much of like a visual gag song. I like it in the movie, but
it reminds me of the Jonathan Richman songs from There's Something About Mary.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, it's like
singing narrator.
Yeah.
That's such a nice like parallel and a nice comparison, because that is also like a very weird, subversive, like fourth wall breaking kind of film for its time. I feel like this.
Yeah, Lizzo doesn't get shot in this one.
There's that. It's I have kind of mixed feelings about it. Again, like I don't think, like Katherine has said a lot, like I don't know if I'm listening to it in my recreational time, but I think it's great in the movie. I think it works for the film. I think it's a nice little ramp up to what you're going to see. It fits.
Well, I think this film does a really nice job of finding times to double down a little bit on the joke. I mean, we were talking about the dance sequence of the I'm Just Ken, of like, well, they kind of keep going. They go on, Singing in the Rain. They go on the Grease Lightning set. Like they do all these things, and they're sort of like doubling down on it. I think that they did that really well with Pink, where yes, like it's funny when the first time when you're like, okay, she's narrating, And then once, you know, she's thinking these thoughts, Margot Robbie's thinking these thoughts about death and like, is kind of malfunctioning. And, you know, before she goes to see Weird Barbie, you know, it's narrated and like, you know, the joke is like she spells out the word pink, P, panic. And then, you know, that it gets, I think that's like a nice doubling down.
Death. K is death.
So I think that was like a nice, like, foreshadowing of some of the like, okay, they're really going for it in this movie. And like, it was like a nice kind of like foreshadowing of some of that stuff that they could have just done the first one and still be funny, but I think it brings it to another level with the second like death version of the song.
The maximum criticism I've seen, or I think the most common criticism I've seen of this movie so far is, well, not everything hits, but I would rather see like just a blatantly weird movie, which I think this is. I think people are not talking enough about how absolutely bonkers it is.
Weird,
I would rather see them just absolutely shoot for the moon, and maybe go a little bit left than not try. And I think there are so many ways this movie could have been boring and unoriginal and corporate and very much like led by Mattel. And the things that they do and get away with are really genuinely strange and satisfying. The end line of the movie, which if you've seen the movie, you know this, she goes to the real world, she becomes a real girl. And there's this whole scene, she's like in her car and she's like, looks like she's going to a job interview, like, okay, I can do it. And then big Margot Robbie smile standing in front of a desk says, I'm here to see my gynecologist.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect ending.
And then Barbie girl rap.
Like, and it's just like uproarious laughter in my theater. Like people were just like, what the shit, clapping. It's so great.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Really interesting and really fun, given that this collaboration I think is really fun. So
yeah, and to go back to I'm Just Ken, that song, Ryan Gosling cut the vocals a year before they finished it.
Wow.
And when Mark Ronson had sent it back to Ryan Gosling, I guess for approvals, he was like, oh yeah, I got Slash to play guitar solo at the end.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, there's a bunch of and like who else is on? It's like a whole bunch of
Wolfgang Van Halen.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing.
There's honestly all these kind of insane little, like you said earlier, Scott, samples and, interpretations pulled from other songs that you know and that you start to notice the more you listen to the soundtrack. And I imagine like the more you watch the movie, that give you that sense of I've been here before, which is kind of cool. I think pop music does that really well, not just in terms of how they reinterpreted Barbie Girl, but Speed Drive by Charlie XCX has these little loops that are like Cobra Style by Robin. Mickey is in there. These little things that kind of like these little elements of spice that like trigger that dopamine hit in your brain. You're like, oh, dopamine, cool. The whole movie is kind of like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Choose Your Fighter by Ava Max was like reminiscent of some of her earlier work too, and like almost kind of sampled Kings and the Queens that is one of her songs, and so it's interesting. And apparently like none of that like came from up on high, or Greta didn't say like, oh, we need these interpolations, we need these samples. It was kind of like from the artists themselves. It's like, well, we want to bring in this sort of like familiarity and nostalgia to some of these songs too, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I could probably go on for a really long time about like Weird Barbie, like just the entire character and purpose of like Weird Barbie in this film. And the moment that Barbie, stereotypical Barbie, Margot Robbie, chooses the Birkenstock to enter the real world and her song to kind of go into the real world via Barbie convertible is it's Indigo Girls Closer to Fine, which everybody knows. But it's like it's such a good pick. Right? It's such a good pick for so many reasons, because the sing-along that you yell in the car already 10-10.
That was my push from this movie. Like push like that, but like this Closer to Fine was like my version of that in this film. It's like perfect.
Yeah.
It's like,
but it's also lyrically
real, we're real now, like perfect. It's so perfect.
Yeah. So good.
Okay, so I was listening to a couple episodes to, prepare for this a little bit and just like getting some of the back catalogs. I listened to the episode that Scott was on in December about Elf, and there's so many parallels between Elf and this movie that I was like, is it kind of the same movie almost? Like they have like, you know, this person that doesn't fit in the fictional world. They have this like very prolonged cartoonish sequence of them going to the real world, you know, bye buddy, hope you find your dad, and then he's like all of a sudden magically, and you know, as our Barbie and Ken in the real world, and you know, he's going through the tunnel, but like she's in California and on Venice Beach, and I don't know, I just like, I haven't like gone a lot further than that, but I thought that was really interesting too. I'm like, man, there's like a lot of parallels here. I feel like there's probably more that we could pick them out. Yeah, true.
And Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell is in it, but not playing the fish out of water, you know, titular character.
Not enraging a little person.
Yeah, not doing that. No, it is very similar. It's totally very similar. Also, again, like Elf is a movie that uses a lot of practical effects and feels like very real, but also very fantastical at the same time. Like it's all based in like Rankin Bass movies, whereas the Barbie movie is all based in, we're going to build a dream house and we're going to do it real and to the exact scale that it would be if Barbie were human size. Which to me, again, it like satisfies parts of my brain that I don't normally, you know, they don't normally get that kind of stimulation. You don't get that watching a Marvel movie, folks.
Yeah, they shot it on the stages that in the same areas that they shot a lot of the Harry Potter like practical effects in Leavesden, where so I thought like, you know, they were able to build up that world so incredibly and so beautifully. You can really feel the care that went into that, and it pays off so well. I thought the movie, they were going to spend a lot more time in the real world, and it's going to be like, oh, how does Barbie do that? But they went back pretty quickly, and I think it's a great use of their budget to, you know, to spend all that money kind of building up that soundstage.
Me too, and I think that's one way that it does differ from Elf, whereas Elf is mostly that fish out of water story and him trying to make his way in the big city. I assumed that that's what was going to be happening in this film, and it's not really. It takes a lot of turns that you do not expect it to take, and they spend a lot of time in Barbie Dreamland, and I think that's fantastic because that's kind of where you want to live. That's where like the childlike part of you wants to stay, and somehow they still manage to pull off like great, incredible gags and a great story. There's also a lot of, aside from the soundtrack, a lot of kind of like great little like musical gags and jokes and asides in this film, right? Like Ryan and I have already discussed this, but there is like a joke in the Mojo Dojo Casa sequence where everything has gone like full patriarchy in Barbie Land and the Kens have taken over, where somebody's trying to like mansplain pavement.
Stephen Malcolm.
Oh, yeah.
That was a huge laugh line for me, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one in my theater that laughed at that. I thought that was
Ryan and me too. Like, so that there's three of us for sure.
Love it.
Yeah, there was a lot of that in that sequence, also about like the Snyder Cut and like a lot of
the Snyder Cut was like so good.
So
and then
good.
And then the two things that were like really like, how did they get away with this, with Helen Mirren like breaking the fourth wall and saying like, don't hire Margot Robbie if you're going to talk about how, you know, she's so ugly right now. And then the Mattel logo over Issa Rae when she, you know, says motherfuckers. I don't know, just both of those things is so, it's like Mattel signed off on this is like pretty incredible.
He doesn't get a lot of musical moments. We haven't talked very much about Michael Cera's Alan, which is also just a fantastic, he does the most with that role.
He's so good.
Oh, let's back up for Michael Cera for a second. Speaking of the Snyder Cut, I was reading our good friend Tara's Substack, Tara Jean Casper's Substack, and she said there is a cut scene from the movie where there's like a fart opera.
Oh yeah, I read about that too.
Yeah, so she's and she said, you know, if Warner Brothers is going to pay up for the fucking Snyder Cut, then they should release the fart opera scene.
Release the fart cut. Well, like Greta Gerwig, I read, like really wanted that in, and one of her other films, I've already forgotten it, also had like some kind of weird like fart sequence. So this Greta Gerwig was just like really amused by farts, and I can only respect that.
Yeah, but you know what? If you want to see a fart opera, that is something that happens in Shrek the Musical. So do what you will. There's there's a pro shot of Shrek the Musical. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it still is, but there is a song where they fart and burp in melody together. So
good to know.
Ryan's face right now is not amused. Not seeing the Shrek part.
I'm just trying to process this
body
information.
Humor is like, I'm honestly glad that was left out.
Yeah,
that would have took me out of it a little bit, but
yeah. So let's talk about Alan.
I love Alan.
I love Alan. Alan is Michael Cera's back, baby. Come on, Michael Cera. I love Michael Cera. I'm like predisposed to loving Michael Cera because he's just like an indie nerd.
He has a moment where he reveals that there were other Allens and that they go out into the real world and no one notices because no one cares about Alan. But he says that all of NSYNC are Allens, and I didn't even catch this the first time, but the second time through, I noticed he says, "Yes, even that one," like referring to Justin Timberlake.
It's such an incredible, like, yeah, you kind of got to think about it for a second. So good. And no right to be that amazing. It's so good. And another one of that is like so many good little musical like asides. It's really a very like musical movie in a lot of ways, and I adore that. Great.
Yeah, I think something I'm looking forward to noticing again when I see it again is some of the, things that are in the background of these. Alan was in the background of a lot of shots, and just his like acting or background acting is so good too. And just like his reactions and body language and all of that kind of stuff too. And a lot of other characters had that. I know like Simu Liu did that really well, and a couple of the other Kens, but Alan was really a standout there. Is like you really kind of could zero in on him and be really entertained.
Well, Alan is like painted for the cheap seats. Like they have him done up in this huge, like a creepy marionette doll or something. Like it's great. The whole effect of his character and his costuming is it's so spot on. So good.
So speaking of like little like nerdy things with this soundtrack, the soundtrack supervisor producer, his name is George Draculius.
Okay.
So he's a producer. He is Greek American, so I might have butchered his name. So he's best known for working as an A&R at American Recordings with Rick Rubin, who he met by dating Rick Rubin's ex-girlfriend.
That's incredible.
Wow.
So he's worked on a bunch of films, including Tropic Thunder, the Hangover movies. He's produced like Tom Petty and the Black Crows. So he's involved with this film, but he's also like referenced in movies and music. Like the Beastie Boys have referenced his name in a song. In Paul's Boutique, they have a line, "Went from the station to Orange Julius. I bought a hot dog from who? George Draculius."
Wow.
Wow.
You did that so well, by the way.
There is a character in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou named Ossuary Draculius, who is named after George Draculius and Guy Ossuary.
Wow.
Damn.
Wow.
It is a pretty badass surname, though.
Yeah.
Rhymes with a lot.
And you know who co-wrote The Life Aquatic? Noah Baumbach.
There you go.
Oh, shit.
Full frickin' circle.
That's it.
It's coming around.
That's the stuff right there.
That's cool. That's a cool connection.
So we live bar in the show is being in that garage with all of the like string pinned up on a wall.
I have a question for you, Scott, and in general too. It's like, what do you take as Noah Baumbach being kind of the co-writer of this film? Like, everyone mentions Greta Gerwig so often, but like, and I know there's a lot of history we don't need to get into there, but like, what do you take as like this being a co-written film and it being like very much half or more male?
Well, I think that like it's interesting because they wrote this basically in lockdown and COVID lockdown. And so it makes sense like the two of them were there together, they're in a relationship. So it like makes sense that they would just be working on something together. But in a bigger picture, I think it's interesting, like his movie that came out last year that the two of them worked on together, White Noise, this movie, and also like a bunch of other, Oppenheimer, Asteroid City, like all of these movies from these big auteur directors seem to be really like grappling in some way with COVID, in these are all like very existentialist films that are asking these questions about like, what does it mean to be human, and what are we here for, and what are we doing, and they all have these like huge ensembles and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know, I don't have any like specific insight. I'm not enough of a Noah Baumbach fan to like see his fingerprints on this, but it would be interesting to watch White Noise and this back to back and just see like the different ways that they're approaching kind of similar questions.
I just like thinking about as a married couple writing this film, like how fun that would be. You're just like doing dishes or something. You come up with that like sick burn about Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
We should say that all the guys of NSYNC are Allens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Should it be
Even
Backstreet
him?
Boys or should it be NSYNC? Well, NSYNC we can make it
and emphasize even that
yeah,
one.
and NSYNC we can have quote unquote that one. So we should probably do NSYNC.
Yeah. It's so good.
I guess because I'm a huge fan of like the Life Aquatic, I assume there's like absurd moments in that movie that kind of, I feel like there's that absurdist humor in this one as well. But I mean, we also have Lady Bird and Crash Into Me.
That's true. Yeah.
True. I mean, no,
She loves
totally.
a needle drop.
She does. And we love her for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we kind of touched on this question earlier, but what artist do you feel is missing from the soundtrack?
Ooh. I guess I would like to have seen some like older iconic artists, like could we have had a Dolly Parton on here? Could we have had a Cher on here? Or
Madonna.
Madonna. Like I think it would have been really cool to like, obviously they're trying to do this like, let's have an album that's really popular and that people like as an album and listen to and stream and whatever, and I get that, but I think thematically it would have been cool to have this sort of like multi-generational thing. So yeah, I don't know.
I'm gonna answer how I thought you were gonna answer, Scott, and I think Carly Rae Jepsen could have been on there. I think she writes her best songs for films, like Cut to the Feeling was written for an animated film in 2017, and one of her best songs, obviously she has a ton of great songs, but I think this could have really like been mutually beneficial for her, just getting more into kind of the zeitgeist, but also for the film, since her songs, especially when it's like for a certain purpose, are straight bangers, and like I think it could have brought us more into that like pure pop versus kind of some of this up and down like that we get on the soundtrack.
Yeah. What about you guys?
Those are such good answers. That's such good answers. You guys are so smart. I don't even know. I mean, first of all, this entire compilation feels really stacked with some very famous, top of mind, relevant people. So in terms of like relevance and making it feel like what pop is now, I think they kind of nailed it. And it feels like anything else would almost be like gravy. I don't know what I would swap out or swap in. I know everybody expected Taylor. Everybody probably wanted, somebody on the level of Britney. But at the same time, if you got a Taylor or a Britney, would it almost feel like too much? Would it feel overwhelming? Yeah. Would it feel too saccharine? So that's where I'm kind of like struggling with. Maybe they did really kind of hit the right mix. Now, do I wish like some of the tracks by the individual artists were maybe a little bit better? Yeah, I definitely do. But I don't know what I would necessarily add. I love your Dolly Parton answer.
Yeah.
Because suddenly I want that so bad. And Barbie too, if they ever get her to make it. Yeah. I kind of don't want her to. But if it happens, it'll happen.
Maybe she could have a cameo. I think she'd have a perfect cameo in a film.
I mean, she's the Backwoods Barbie, and they left out the Backwoods Barbie, so now I'm kind of like stuck on that. Thanks for that.
She could be a previous stereotypical Barbie that went to the real world.
Absolutely.
Joke answer Phoebe Bridgers, because Phoebe Bridgers is inevitable.
Inescapable.
Non-joke answer. I think first thought was Janelle Monáe.
Yeah. It's a good one too.
Or Robin, but maybe because she already wrote Dancing on My Own, maybe you can't have her cover her own song. Because I feel like that song would be perfect on the soundtrack.
I would have loved Kylie too. Like a Kylie Minogue would have been a cool one.
Yeah, that would have been fun. I mean, just put Padam Padam on here.
Yeah.
Right? That would have fit.
Any of the new Janelle Monáe songs too, honestly. Like a lot of them would have fit on here too. I feel like even if she maybe didn't want to because it'd be a conflict with her new album, like she could have just lent one of those to Barbie and it would have been really good.
She isn't that. That's a great answer.
Like I only have eyes for two.
Yeah. God, that album is really good.
I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but can someone explain to me what the fuck is this Gale Butterfly song?
Ryan's so upset.
I think Scott, you got to do it.
So Gale is. Gale is a TikTok artist. Yes.
Yes. I sorry if I'm explaining this at a lower level than we expected, but she rose to fame because she wrote a song on TikTok called ABC FU, and it literally like interpolates the ABCs. Yeah. And it's everywhere. It's not a good song, and so that's her rise to claim to fame. And so now she's trying to do a little bit more. She's the first opener on some of the Taylor Swift era's tour dates. So like she's definitely in more of the realm. But yeah, then they had her do this interpolation of Butterfly, which is interesting.
And she's fully 19 years old. That was my hesitation of wanting to describe her because she is like a child, you know. And so like whatever, it's not really for me, but like God bless her, you know.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, and like she can grow into like an artist that does interesting things, maybe or maybe not.
She could be another Clive Lawrence.
Yes, she could be Clive Lawrence. Who am I? I feel like I'm seeing Laura. I'm seeing the Jonas Brothers. By the time this comes out, I will have already seen the Jonas Brothers. But Lawrence is the opening act, so I will see Clive.
Oh wow! Okay, well, this has all been very illuminating. I also feel like I'm about ready to burst into dust from age. It's made me feel older than I have.
But the thing about the Gale song is Butterfly by Crazy Town is also not a good song, and that song samples a Red Hot Chili Pepper song, which is also not a good song. So this one is like 3 layers deep.
It's a baklava shitty song.
And apparently it is the only sample that Crazy Town ever got cleared.
Wow.
And like we were Scott and I were talking about this earlier, and he's like, yeah, this is weird, like this one isn't in the film, and I like had to look it up, and it is in the film for like a few seconds when they're describing like Weird Barbie's backstory, which makes sense. It's like, okay, in the 90s, like this was a thing and it was playing in the background. So I appreciate that if they were gonna need to use Butterfly or a cover of it or an interpolation of it, that they, you know, flipped it to a female singer. Like I think that was a good move. But that particular song is a little bit of a weird choice. That one, again, in this Ronson interview, was apparently from Greta that she wanted this song in it. And so they like found Gale to do that basically. So that wasn't even just like Gale being like, this would be a good one. It was like, no, this is like what they want to put in that scene, which is just an interesting choice.
I'm glad the Kens didn't like dance to it for like 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm both like simultaneously glad that it was used this way, and then also like just really upset at it. I kind of want to pretend it's like it's not here, it's not happening. I think also because like we have, you know, whatever early aughts trauma.
I think it can safely be a skip on this album for you if you ever listen to it in the future. I think that I give you permission to never listen to it again if you don't want to.
Okay, you hear that? You have Catherine's permission to skip.
We will, like Scott said, we will await better music from Gale, and we will champion her every step of the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gale, no royalties from us.
No 0.0001.
You no 0.02.
Yeah.
And then the last one really is Barbie Dreams, the 50/50 song, which interpolates the Janet Jackson track together again, which is weird and cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is another one I think is actually not in the film.
Yeah.
But it's nice on the soundtrack.
They just want those K-pop
streams.
Yeah. Weird and cool and a little bit disorienting is a good way to describe the movie, and also a lot of the choices that were made with some of these songs that got thrown in. They really feel like they're in the back corners of like a millennial brain, and so I get where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that I want to listen to that ever.
Yeah, it's one of those songs where I was like too sugary for me.
Yeah, this is like a interesting, like family friendly film, but it's not a kids movie. Like it's a very interesting kind of mix.
Yeah, I remember leaving the theater and some mom brought her like 8 or 9-year-old daughter, and her daughter was like, "I didn't understand that last joke that everyone was laughing at. Maybe when I'm older." And her mom was like, "Yeah."
Or we'll have a chat about that.
Well, thank you, Scott and Katherine, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, this was a great time. Appreciate you having us on.
Like I was telling them offline, Nicole and I are a little bit more like indie rock oriented, so we wanted to make sure that like we had people who know who Pink Panthers is, or knows more about Charlie XCX than she sings a hook on a Danny Brown song.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I told that to my Generation Z cousin, and she like looked at me horrified.
That's so funny. Oh my god, Charlie XCX is one of my favorite artists of all time. So that's amazing, an amazing sort of description of it. I love that.
I actually really love her, by the way. So I've got some pop sensibilities. They're not Gail.
I like everything I've heard from her, but I like really have no frame of reference.
It's amazing.
For her.
And that one, if like she hadn't been on the soundtrack, that would have been my answer for like who needs to be on the soundtrack. Because to me, she embodies the current like pop movement, at least from what I can see, is like just so energetic and so pushing the boundaries and like doing her own thing. And this one was a really fun one. And it's just such a Charlie song to be like, it's about cars, it's about speeding. Like it's like doing this sort of sample in an interesting way, but like who gives a fuck about it? Like, I mean, that's just such her personality. So to me, that was one of the highlights too. And that dropped before the soundtrack came out. So I love that one.
Yeah, I think it's got Song of Summer potential.
I agree.
Well, other than I'm Just Ken.
I think it's like Speed Drive, Padam, and Rush by Troye Sivan are really going to be, you go into like any gay bar, progressive city, and hear those over and over and over and over again. And honestly, we're better for it. So that's okay.
Yeah, I work on a college campus, and the students were blasting Speed Drive during like an orientation get together.
They have great
taste.
Makes
me so happy.
Yeah. Trying to roll one way.
I tried not to like bump my head too much because there'd be like, oh, that staff guy like trying to be cool. So you guys will be back soon with new episodes.
Yes.
But if people want to check out the back catalog, including your interview with Mitski, which I plugged on Earbuds Collective, how can they find you guys?
And my episode with you. You're there too, so.
And my episode with me, that got referenced in another episode, which made me so excited.
Yeah.
When he was like, "Oh, actually, the Universal's like the number one place on my iTunes." I was like, yes.
You can find us at wherever you listen to podcasts. It's called "This Is the Greatest Song I've Ever Heard in My Entire Life," or you can find us on social media at Great Song Pod. It's GR8 Song Pod. And yeah, we should be coming back soon with exciting new episodes as soon as we line up new guests. And we're really looking forward. Oh yeah, please. Seriously.
Yeah,
actually let's make that happen.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Honored. I won't know anything about Gail. I'm so sorry in advance.
And of course, you can find us on social media at soundtrack_you're on Twitter or X or whatever the fuck it's called now. And on Instagram at SoundtrackCast. And, hopefully we can get together soon, because I have a new story about my super uncomfortable experience at the Adele concert.
Ooh.
That was a really good cliffhanger there.
Great cliffhanger. And I have so many questions, but I'm not going to ask.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.